Hi everyone, my name is Ian. I'm here today to bring you a question and answer video. These are some of the top questions I've been getting from some of my friends, and I just wanted to answer them for you in case any of you had the same questions. First of all, thank you for tuning in today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, drop a comment below with your own questions, and I'll make sure to address your questions in future editions. All right, let's get started. So the first question is, my friend wanted me to discuss body fat percentage needed for ab visibility and appearing veiny. All right, so there's a couple factors that I wanted to bring up here. Depending on muscularity and genetics, individuals may be able to see them at different body fat percentage ranges. An individual who's very muscular may be able to have visible abs around 20% body fat, right? But somebody who's less muscular might need to get down to 10%. On average, I think the average person will be able to see their abs at around 15% body fat. That's a pretty fair number. Maybe you'll see like some strongman competitors, really bigger athletes with high amounts of muscle. They can probably see their abs around 20%. For the average person, you're probably going to have a belly at 20%, so not going to be looking too lean at 20%. Shoot for 15%. You're probably going to be pretty happy with the way you look, but depending on genetics and how you store fat throughout the body, it's not a guarantee. So yeah, 10 to 20%. Look at that range there. And yeah, drop a comment down below and let me know what body fat percentage did you first start to see your abs. All right, now let's address the second part of that question, appearing veiny, right? So I'm sure you've seen pictures of bodybuilders, Gymshark athletes, people looking very vascular and veiny, right? Appearing veiny relates to multiple different factors, some which can and can't be controlled for, right? So the three main factors, not an exhaustive list here, but I'd like to say the three main factors are probably skin thickness, body fat percentage, and whether you have a pump or not, right? So how full of blood are your muscles, and how hard are your veins actually working? You know, are you cold, or have you just been working out? Do you have a pump going? Skin thickness, while it is correlated to body fat percentage to some extent, there's not so much you can do about your skin thickness, right? I'm sure you've seen some people with the appearance of very thin skin, right? You can see all their veins. Some people have just thicker skin. And there's pros and cons, you know, like having thicker skin probably makes you more resistant to cuts and injuries. Thinner skin makes you look more aesthetic, I guess. But and so there's something you can do. I think as you get leaner, you will lose fat from the skin, but I think subcutaneous fat it's generally one of the last places your body tends to lose fat. So unless you're like probably getting beneath 10% body fat, like really lean, you know, bodybuilder stage lean, you're probably not going to get like that thin skinned appearance. So what I would say is your best bet is to get to a reasonable body fat percentage, maybe like, you know, in that 10 to 15% range, and get a pump before you take any of your pictures, right? If you make sure you get a pump and have good lighting before taking your posing pictures, that's really going to go a long ways in making you look more veiny, and, you know, giving showing muscle definition, right? Lighting goes a long way, having a pump goes a long way, and body fat is meaningful. But I just want to give a disclaimer, like, I don't think you'll have really noticeably thin skin unless you get extremely lean and you have a pump. So in that like maybe 5 to 8% body fat range, that's where your skin starts to look really thin, you know, like you could just like die to a paper cut or something, like you know, so that's it, you have to get really lean to get that thin skinned appearance and have a pump, right? All right, so hopefully that addressed that question. If it wasn't fully addressed, drop a comment below and let me know what you'd like me to elaborate on more there. All right, question number 2. Can you discuss a few ways to optimize recovery for the average person? All right, that's a good question, and there's a lot of info out there regarding this, but I'll give my top few bullet points that I like to assess when training a client or meeting somebody and asking them about their goals. All right, so the first one, in no particular order, the first one is training volume. So keeping track of the number of hard working sets you perform each week and trying not to violate your acute to chronic workload principle. All right, so what that means is you want to add 1 to 2 hard working sets each week per exercise or muscle group and see how you respond, right? So if you can't recover from that, dial it back, maybe only add a set every other week. But if you can recover very easily, maybe you can handle more next week, all right? So, for example here, don't go from being sedentary to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week. Ease your way in. Maybe start at like 8 or 9 sets per muscle group per week, maybe across 2 or 3 different training sessions spread out throughout the week, and titrate up the number of hard sets gradually as your recovery allows, right? So there's a car going in the background, so I'll reiterate the first part of this. Add 1 to 2 hard working sets each week per exercise, and then see how you respond on a week-to-week basis. If you notice that your recovery is significantly impaired, maybe don't add so many sets, right? So let's say like you did 9 sets per muscle group per week last week, and then the next week you try to bump it up to like 12 or 15. That would represent an addition of 3 sets to 6 sets. That's kind of a big bump up in volume. If you notice that you handle it okay, then that's great. If everything else is dialed in, you can definitely tolerate more training volume. But if you're not recovering well, consider slowing down the rate of volume increase and allow yourself to recover adequately, and your strength and muscle gain should improve as a result. All right. Next bullet point, sleep. So try to get an adequate amount in a dark, quiet room. Trying to put down electronic devices maybe an hour before bed. Try and use a blue light filter if you can't help looking at screens. That can potentially help. I think the verdict is still out on that, so I don't want to act like that will negate the effects of using electronics. All right. Try to avoid caffeine intake 8 to 12 hours before bed. Avoid having Wi-Fi routers in your bedroom. Try to remove electronics from the room, or at least not have them next to your bed. I violate this last point a lot. I don't know if that's really scientifically proven. I think the verdict is still out on how harmful it might be to have Wi-Fi and electronic devices nearby. All right. So then the next major bullet point, besides after sleep, is hydration. This is a short one. Just adequate hydration derived from food and drinks. If you live in a hotter environment and you sweat a lot, make sure you're consuming adequate electrolyte intake in addition to your fluids, so you don't end up with hyponatremia or hypokalemia, low potassium or sodium. So just make sure that you're staying adequately hydrated, not excessively hydrated, because you don't want to throw off the balance of the solids in your blood, right? So next bullet point here regarding recovery is nutrition. So for performance and recovery, I recommend either a small surplus or maintaining a close to calorie maintenance diet. That's the most likely to help you maintain performance. A small surplus might start to cause gradual weight and fat gain. So, watch out for too big of a surplus. Maybe just 100 or 200 calories of surplus. That could be ideal for a rate of muscle gain with adequate protein intake. As you get into maybe like a 500 calorie surplus, 1,000 calorie surplus, you'll start to notice, gaining fat. And, it's very rare to find a client who just wants to gain weight. Most people want to gain muscle or lose fat. So, yeah, if you find that you're gaining more fat than you'd like, consider limiting the calorie surplus. I generally find that a small deficit of calories, if you're trying to lean out, it may not impact your performance that much, but the bigger that your deficit becomes, the more exaggerated impediment to performance that you will see, the bigger of a calorie deficit that you're in. So I'd never really take like a high performance athlete who really cares about their strength response or field performance, whatever, like a combat athlete, field athlete. I wouldn't put those type of athletes in a big calorie deficit because it's too likely to be deleterious for their performance, right? We don't want them to suffer on the field. For many athletes out there, that matters a lot more than aesthetics. So keep that in mind when assigning your clients calorie surpluses and deficits. You don't want to gain such an insurmountable amount of fat that you do need a big cut in the future, because if you force yourself into a big cut at some point, you are going to be sacrificing your performance and ability to tolerate high amounts of intense training volume during that period of time where you are dieting. So just planning it out, making sure you don't get too fat, making sure that you don't have to essentially sacrifice too much performance if performance is what you care about, right? And, with that being said, it's not like it's never going to come back. So, if you are maybe overweight right now, it's probably worth it for your health to sacrifice your performance in the short term for some of the longer term health benefits that you might see, right? So hopefully that addressed 4 of those bullet points that I listed for improving performance for the average trainee. None of those things were really like high tech with devices or any like technology. Just monitoring your rest, nutrition, training volume, and hydration. All right. If you want me to elaborate more on any of those points below, drop a comment with your question in it, and I'll address it in the next video. All right, so the third question, this is kind of like a pseudo case study type of question. One of my friends had a client, so they had an individual managing snapping hip syndrome that they've apparently had for over 20 years, mostly on the right side, and they experience it mostly during kicking, and they experience mild discomfort. Maybe that's why it's gone on for 20 years without seeking a more significant intervention. Their resistance training status is unknown. The client is in their late 30s. They've had this ever since they were a teenager. All right, so first let's discuss the etiology of snapping hip syndrome, right? So the first type is referred to as, in no particular order, external snapping hip. This is caused by the iliotibial tract sliding over the greater trochanter. All right, so that's on the side of your hip. Maybe you notice it when you're doing like leg lifts or reverse crunches, like a hanging from a bar, or dip bar, leg lifts, knee lifts. You might notice that popping sensation on the outside of the hip. I've had this before, and I want to precede this actually. Any of these causes of snapping hip, if they're not noticeably caused by an acute injury with an acute onset, they're generally going to be, I would categorize them as a chronic condition, right? So these are all more of like a chronic condition. So the first type, external snapping hip, iliotibial tract sliding over the greater trochanter. All right. The next type, internal snapping hip. This is caused by the iliopsoas tendon sliding over either the femoral head, the iliopectineal ridge, the lesser trochanter, or the iliopsoas bursa, right? So a couple different structures here that the iliopsoas tendon can slide over, causing that internal snapping hip. All right, so the next kind is intra-articular snapping hip, caused by loose bodies in the hip or labral tears. The loose bodies can be seen in conjunction with or as a result of synovial chondromatosis. All right, so to get any of these diagnosed, you probably want to see a doctor or a physical therapist. I'm definitely just a trainer, so I can't actually diagnose injuries. If I had a client in front of me, I could probably run a battery of field tests to try to narrow it down, but I still can't provide that official diagnosis because that would be definitely stepping outside the bounds of what I do, probably considered malpractice, probably illegal. All right, so yeah, there exists a lot of different treatment options. There's corticosteroid injections and surgery, but today we're going to cover more non-invasive exercise-based options. What I would do if I had a client just trying to seek more conservative management for their symptoms, right? So some people find massage beneficial. I'll leave that there. Drop a comment below if you want it discussed further. It's largely placebo mediated, but don't show this to your client. I don't want to ruin that beneficial placebo effect. If they do find that they get significant benefit from massage, you don't want to ruin that for them, right? So if somebody likes massage, they might find that helps, but we'll just leave it there. All right. I don't want to start the flame war arguments in the comments about that. Let's move on. So I already touched on how, seeing this condition, if they're not listing a particular moment in time where they had an acute injury to me, it's probably a chronic condition. So maybe something movement based. What I would do is I would perform a battery of movement tests, so a compilation of movement tests to screen for any particularly weak muscles. Given that the patient described unilateral symptoms, mostly on the right side, I would probably start examining. I'd start by examining their two-legged movements to look for any glaring deviations. Most of my battery would probably be comprised of single-sided unilateral exercises, and I would assign rate of perceived exertion questions to each movement to get a better understanding of areas that are most in need of improvement, right? So those RPE, rate of perceived exertion questions, are going to let you know essentially what you're doing is you're trying to apply the same stimulus to their both sides of the body and see, just kind of narrow it down to see, are there any muscle groups that are particularly weak here, right, that need to be strengthened. So then based on the questionnaire, I would recommend different strength and conditioning movements to shore up weaknesses and strengthen any of the weaker muscle groups that you found. Might be a few, might be many. We don't really know until we perform the battery of tests, right? So hopefully shoring up the strength, the muscle weaknesses might help the individual manage their symptoms, right? Strength training can help manage the inflammatory process. Building strength in weaker muscles can potentially improve the way some of these structures are tracking. And sorry, there's a vehicle passing by. shoring up any deficits in strength can definitely help improve the way that these structures are tracking in relation to each other, and really just help improve the ability for everything to work well and smoothly. All right. And definitely you want to see a doctor or physical therapist for the specific diagnosis. I know back in the day, people would just hear crepitus, joint creakiness, and just diagnose you with arthritis. So I'm sure you could present these issues to several different clinicians or doctors and end up with an array of results. So maybe even see multiple doctors and see, do they tell you the same thing, or are they all telling you different stuff? Are they jumping to push you into surgery? Maybe they have financial incentive. Maybe they really just think it's the best thing for you to do, right? So I don't want to ascribe malicious intent. I think in general, the average healthcare practitioner probably has your best interest in mind. So, listen to their information with a grain of salt, because, you could bring this condition to multiple different clinicians or doctors, get different diagnoses. So, yeah, try to get multiple diagnoses, really give yourself the most information before you decide on how to manage your treatment options. All right. Yeah, so these are just the recommendations of what I would do in the meantime if I saw a client, and potentially once I ran through my battery of exercises and I was able to make a list of any really weaker muscle groups, any strength deficiencies in particular areas, send them to the doctor or clinician with that list that I made. See, maybe does the doctor or clinician perform a similar battery? Do they find the same results from their assessment? And share the notes with them too. Say that I had this assessment. Do you agree? Yes or no? Why or why not? All right, and then figure out what their stance is on some of the results from the battery of tests. All right. So this is a major key here that I want to point out. All right. So I want to point out that probably no humans have perfectly symmetrical force production. So there's an acceptable range of variance that we're looking for, right? So significant deviations may present issues, but don't freak out if you have mild differences, right? So this is completely normal. And, again, if you stuck around till the end of this video, thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe below with any questions that you might have for next week's question and answer video. Have a great day.